Hello everyone, welcome back to First Friday 5s here on Go Big Bore or Go Home, where recoil is required. Why? Because we're the house of the rising gun. I'm your host Sean, and this month I wanted to talk to you about what you should know before you go out and buy that Smith & Wesson X-frame you want. In every hobby there are always subcategories, and target shooting is no different. Some folks are into the tactical stuff, some people have long-distance shooting, and these days there is even cowboy action shooting, for those who love them some westerns, Pilgrim! But if you're like me and want to get into big bore beasts, there are some things you should know before you start down that road. Here are 5 things you should know before you buy a big bore Magnum handgun. Number 5. They are expensive. This may or may not surprise some folks out there, but buying a big bore Magnum handgun is going to be a bigger investment than your average 9mm. And there is a good reason for that. Let's take a look at the well-known Heritage Rough Rider single-action revolver and .22 long rifle for reference. As you can see, it's pretty diminutive in stature. It has a lightweight frame and grip frame made from aluminum, while the cylinder and barrel are steel. The safety is made from polymer. The cylinder is not very tightly machined with recessed case heads, instead having the whole area recessed. Now, does this mean it's poorly made? Not at all. The pressure and energy it needs to safely deal with in the .22 long rifle or even the .22 Magnum cartridge are not a ton to contend with, so it's as tough as it realistically needs to be, and no more. That makes it far cheaper to produce, and the savings get passed on to the buyer. Now let's take a look at the BFR from Magnum Research. This thing is made entirely from 17-4 pH stainless steel, which is known for its toughness. Since it's a transfer bar system, no safety is needed, but outside of the rear sight, you won't find plastic anywhere. The cylinders are made to very specific tolerances with finely recessed case heads, and the cylinder gap is kept to 0.005 or less on off-the-shelf guns, and 0.002 of an inch on precision center guns. The base pin is also screwed into the barrel to keep it tightly in place. And to be honest, all that precision is absolutely necessary when you're shooting cartridges that generate 1,000 foot-pounds of muzzle energy or more and deal with chamber pressures of up to 65,000 pounds per square inch. And those heavy-duty materials come dear, take time to machine properly, and are harder on the tools that cut and shape them. And the precision required for safe firing of these powerful rounds means lots of research and development and machine time to get it right. And you can expect that kind of attention to detail regardless of the manufacturer, as they are all trying to provide a firearm that is both safe and capable of handling the massive power that it's going to harness. And that means you should expect to spend quite the pretty penny when it's time to buy. There's a good chance that, these days, you'll be spending close to or in excess of $1,000 US, so you should be aware of that before you go big bore. Number 4. They come with their own unique ergonomic challenges. This may seem obvious, but you might be surprised by some of the things that come up in terms of ergonomics with big bore Magnum handguns. When designing a handgun, how comfortable it is to shoot is usually top of mind for a firearms manufacturer. But when you're dealing with a handgun that is shooting a moderately powered cartridge that is not particularly large in terms of overall length and size, that's not too tough of a nut to crack. Imagine the difficulty Smith & Wesson had when designing a gun around the 500 and 460 Smith & Wesson Magnum cartridges. They needed to make a gun with tough steel and plenty of it, which means weight is going to increase. The abnormally long cartridge, even by Magnum standards, means a long frame and cylinder, which will make the weight farther away from the shooter and tougher to hold up. And with the power they generate, there needs to be something to mitigate the recoil, such as the compensator that they added. I think you can see what problems firearms engineers are dealing with. So let's share some of those challenges. Most of these firearms are quite large, meaning that smaller-handed shooters may have trouble getting a firm hold. You may have to find grips that specifically work for you. I have big palms, so I've had the opposite problem. With my BFRs, this has been a challenge that led me to having a Bisley-style grip custom-made by JRH Advanced Gunsmithing specifically for my hands. Believe me, it was money well spent. A lot of folks that shoot single-action big bores will seek out that Bisley style of grip that Ruger designed by converting their Ruger, like I did, to my Super Blackhawk and .44 Magnum. Freedom Arms grips are known for being more comfortable, and now Magnum Research has a Bisley style grip as well. But sadly, this isn't the only problem you may deal with when you finally get a grip. When recoil hits home, it may not only be a big thump to the palm, but have very different effects than expected. Without gloves covering my right thumb, the older BFR grip would take skin off under heavy recoil. Ouch! And I didn't realize that the BFR trigger guard is squared off as opposed to round. Recoil has made the trigger guard make contact with my trigger finger, making it bleed, and this has led me to using leather gloves to protect myself. And while my 500 JRH and 475 line bob BFRs are fine with wood grips and a shooting glove, My 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum really requires a rubber grip to absorb that palm bruising impact. And it's not just the revolvers that have unique problems. Semi-auto big bore Magnums experience unique ergonomic challenges too. I normally like checkered mainspring housings on 1911s, but when I converted one to 460 Roland, I found them to be more hindrance than help, and had to swap to a smooth one, and I went to smoother grip panels too. Desert Eagles require a wider grip for the Magnum length magazine, which is awkward feeling at first. And the slide, with all of its mass, will be quite jarring your first few rounds as it travels towards you and then snaps back. It takes some getting used to. And weight is a necessary evil with these handguns. I've shot several 44 Magnums, and you will definitely notice the difference between the featherweight Smith & Wesson 329 PD and a Ruger Super Red Hawk. But that weight will wear you out and fatigue your hands. When doing our big recoil challenge, my Dan Wesson 7445's longer cylinder and 8-inch barrel made holding it steady tough on Ann. And I feel her pain, as after I added a compensator to my Desert Eagle's 50AE barrel, it added almost a half pound of weight, and all of it at the end of the barrel. It did reduce the punch to the palm to a mere push, so it was certainly worth it. While all these ergonomic issues can be overcome, it's something you should be prepared to deal with. Otherwise, you'll end up with a gun that gathers dust in your safe or ends up for sale. Number 3. Feeding them is a new type of challenge. While I will tell you it's not required, you might want to consider learning to reload if you're going to go big bore. Be aware that this will be a substantial investment all its own, but it may allow you more freedom. Ammunition for big bore Magnums, even popular ones like the 44 Magnum, is not as common nor as varied as it is for calibers like 9mm Parabellum, 45 ACP, or 40 Smith & Wesson. And when you don't reload, you will be at the ammo manufacturer's will in terms of when and how much you shoot. When ammunition manufacturers decide how many types of ammunition and how much of it to produce, they naturally take demand into account. And you can bet your bottom dollar that they will not be making anywhere near as much 480 Ruger as they will 357 Magnum. It can be downright difficult to find some cartridges on the open market, and you may not find the type of round you actually want or need for a particular purpose, like a hunting trip. Some of the ammunition I've used for making videos is not available anywhere outside of my reloading bench. And if you choose a more esoteric round or a wildcat, you may not be able to find ammunition at all. The 500 JRH comes only from Buffalo Bore, or load it yourself. Want to shoot the 475 Maximum? You'll need to load your own ammunition after you cut and reform your own brass. While I haven't had to go that far, some of the cartridges I shoot can be difficult to locate ammo or even components for. I love the 41 Magnum, but the bullets are much scarcer than most other calibers. And the prices are no picnic either. You should expect to pay a premium compared to more common rounds. I've paid up to $5 a round for some of my ammo for the channel. The cost of 454 Casull, which was about $1.30 per round, was bad enough when I first bought my Super Red Hawk. I started reloading shortly after I bought the gun. Like the guns themselves, the ammunition is more scarce and more expensive, and if you like to shoot your big bore Magnums on the regular like me, you need to know it's going to cost you. Number 2. They require more maintenance. If anyone watching is into cars, this will make sense to them. Ferraris are gorgeous machines and they perform at a level few other cars can. But that performance isn't cheap, and the cost to maintain these lust-inspiring cars will make just about any normal car owner never want to own one. Well, your big bore Magnum handgun is a high-performance machine as well. When it comes to maintaining these firearms, it really is as simple as the fact that higher performance means additional wear and tear. Even on something like the 10mm auto, barrel life drops dramatically. KKM Precision says their barrels will last about 40,000 rounds, except on the 10mm, which will probably be worn out by 25,000 rounds. That's a big difference. Imagine what kind of wear and tear your 240 grain 44 Magnum bullets accelerating to 1,450 feet per second are doing to your Smith & Wesson Model 29's barrel. And there's more than just barrel wear to think about. The forcing cone on a revolver will be dealing with way more high-pressure flame wearing it down, and the top strap is going to experience more flame cutting. The cylinder timing is going to get knocked out of whack more frequently and will result in fragments of the bullet being sheared off. You'll want to get that corrected in a timely manner. Grips will get worn down more quickly and springs worn out faster. Hell, Magnum Research recommends changing the Desert Eagle's recoil springs, of which there are 4 since you have 2 guide rods with double-nested springs, around every 700 to 1,000 rounds. Not exactly a problem you'll need to account for on your Glock 19. And after about 1,000 to 1,500 rounds, they have a tune-up kit to replace most of the other springs as well, including magazine springs. Breakages are more frequent as well. I haven't had too many things break, but the ones that have caught me off guard. My grip safety on my 460 Roland 1911 broke and had to be replaced. It was just too much abuse for it. I've had a barrel start to rotate out of the revolver's frame, a barrel get a crack in the forcing cone, and as fans of the channel will know, a small obstruction split a barrel like a fork. The biggest nuisance for me has been pieces of the firearm shaking loose from heavy recoil. Once, when I went to clean my Ruger Super Red Hawk and 454 Casull, I touched the front sight and it just dropped off of the barrel. The screw had been shaken loose to the point it just fell out. I make it a point of habit now to use thread locker on most of my revolver's screws as they often come loose. Sight screws, grip screws, frame screws on my BFRs, even my cylinder latch and frame plate screws on my Smith & Wesson 460 XVR PC have wiggled loose. And if you plan on adding an optic, you will need to be able to get it on there tight. Not to mention, it had better be able to stand up to that recoil as my 454 Casull has already destroyed a scope. On single-action revolvers, base pins will want to walk out of the frame, which has led me to buy oversized base pin latches from Belt Mountain just to keep them in place. Big bore handguns are all kinds of fun, but just like anything that provides high performance, maintenance is going to be required. And the higher the performance, the more maintenance you should expect to perform. Number 1. Drum roll, please. Big bore Magnums have Big Bore Magnum Recoil. I'm sure most of you saw this coming, and if you didn't, like your Big Bore Magnum handgun, it will hit you right in the face. And I'm serious about that. While most people believe they're ready to handle a big recoil machine, many people get caught by surprise when they pull the trigger. And while it can be startling or jarring, it can also be dangerous. The most important thing to know here is that everyone experiences recoil differently. If you've seen some of the brutes I habitually take to the range, it won't come as a surprise that I don't personally find the recoil of the 44 Magnum to be objectionable or even that strong. I'll admit that I enjoyed that recoil from the first time I fired one when I was about 20. I guess I have a masochistic streak, what can I say? But everyone has a threshold for recoil, and for most people the 44 Magnum is the limit of what they're comfortable with, willing to put up with, or frankly are able to safely handle. Before I bought anything more powerful than a 44 Magnum, I myself was a little weary until a very nice gentleman allowed me to fire a round from his 454 Casull Ruger Tokelet. Most people would either be overwhelmed or taken aback, but I exclaimed, "Whoa," loudly and started laughing with a massive grin on my face. But I know a lot of people who fired my 454 Casull Super Red Hawk once, and only once. And I don't blame them at all. Nor should anyone feel guilty or weak because shooting a particular cartridge leaves them unhappy and unwilling to shoot any more of it. If you're not having fun, then what's the point? This is a hobby, and if it's painful or uncomfortable, it's not worth it. I'll admit that my 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum is really my limit, and my 50 Alaskan Encore is pushing it to the extreme. The Kodiak Arrest, as I call it, is a literal monster that can be extremely dangerous to shoot if you can't control the recoil. The video I shot earlier this year with it required me to shoot 45 rounds to get the footage I needed and left my right forearm and elbow sore for weeks. Turns out I gave myself tendinitis. I've since altered the way I hold and shoot that pistol to prevent further injury. Learn from my mistakes. And besides discomfort, that recoil can also create a well-known bad habit in shooters, the dreaded flinch. Good shooters know that they should never close their eyes when pulling the trigger. It's important to always keep focused on what you're pointing the firearm at. And when you flinch, it can also create a swift and uneven pull of the trigger that jerks the gun off target. Awareness and accuracy are negatively impacted, and this could be a problem with fatal consequences, especially if you flinch when it comes to a self-defense situation or if you're hunting. You don't want to develop a flinch from your 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum that transfers over to your other firearms, but it's hard to keep your eyes focused when it feels like a nuclear bomb was set off at the end of the barrel. So keep this in mind when you're shooting your big bore badass to keep your safe shooting habits sharp. Because when dealing with anything that is capable of this kind of destructive force, nothing is more important than safety. Thanks for watching, and I hope you found this list to be helpful and instructive. Keep in mind that this list is not intended to discourage anyone from choosing to enjoy the hobby of shooting big bore Magnum handguns. Far from it. I just want to help people be prepared for what they're going to be getting into in this hobby, because it's honestly a lot of fun for those who appreciate it. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and if you didn't enjoy it, thanks for making it this far and giving us a chance. And remember, go big bore or go home. Thanks for...
Mr. Wembley, it happened again!